The mysterious awakening. In the quiet silence of the hidden chamber, something was stirring. The air felt different today, thicker, heavier, as if the very universe was holding its breath. The chamber was cold, dark, and unknown to most of the galaxy. Only a few knew of its existence, and fewer still dared to enter it. The walls, ancient and covered in strange markings, seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Within the chamber lay a figure, unconscious, but not just any figure, a human. Her name was Alyra, though she did not know it yet. Her long dark hair framed a face that seemed peaceful, yet there was a deep mystery behind her closed eyelids. For years she had been in this chamber, hidden away by forces far beyond her understanding. The galaxy, with all its advanced civilizations, had no idea she existed. But today, everything was about to change. The strange energy that had been quietly humming in the background grew louder. It resonated through the chamber like a deep, vibrating hum, almost as if the room itself was alive. Alyra's body responded. Her fingers twitched. Her chest rose and fell slightly as if drawing in her first breath. The room's energy seemed to respond to her movements, surging with new strength. The unseen watchers, the alien race known as the Arvithians, had been monitoring this event for months. The Arvithians were an advanced race, powerful and proud. They believed they understood everything about the galaxy, including its most mysterious species, humans. They had kept humanity in check for centuries, convinced that humans were nothing more than a fleeting species, a short-lived, insignificant species, destined to be forgotten in the galaxy's great expanse. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated humanity. As the energy continued to build, the first sound of Alyra's awakening echoed in the chamber, a soft but unmistakable sound. Her eyes fluttered open. Slowly, like the opening of a flower in the first light of dawn, her eyes revealed a strange and unsettling glow. The faint blue light that filled them was unlike any the Arvithians had ever seen. It was not a natural light, but something deep, ancient, and filled with untold power. Zerith, the leader of the Arvithians, watched in awe from his command center, his eyes glued to the screen that monitored Alyra's every movement. He had thought this moment would come, but nothing could have prepared him for what he was seeing now. The human woman was waking, and she was not as they had predicted. Impossible, Zerith muttered under his breath. His voice was a whisper, but his words echoed throughout the room. The Arvithians had been studying humanity for centuries, analyzing every possible threat. Yet this was something entirely different. Alyra's gaze shifted, and though she did not see Zerith, he felt as though she were looking straight at him. The room grew colder, the lights flickering with a faint tremor. Zerith's heart raced, an emotion he had not felt in ages. Fear. Not the kind of fear that comes from physical danger, but a deeper, primal fear, the fear of the unknown. In the chamber, Alyra's senses were awakening faster than even she realized. Memories, long buried, began to surface. Flashbacks of things she did not recognize, wars, battles, and voices calling out her name. There was something inside her, something that had been locked away, waiting for the right moment to emerge. But why now? Why was she waking now? The Arvithians had failed to realize one thing. Humanity was not just a species of weaklings. It had been dormant for so long, but now, through Alyra, the power of humanity was beginning to stir once more. She was not an ordinary human. She was something more, something that had been crafted, designed for a purpose. But the Arvithians, with all their knowledge and technology, could not have known what that purpose was. Alyra sat up, the motion slow and deliberate. The faint glow in her eyes flickered as if reacting to her own thoughts. Her first words were not spoken, but felt. An unspoken message seemed to resonate from her, sending a ripple of energy through the chamber. The walls, once cold and silent, now hummed with an intensity that even the Arvithians couldn't ignore. The ancient technology in the room, the very machinery that had kept her asleep for so long, began to stir. Zerith, his mind racing, understood one thing in that moment. They had made a grave error. Whatever Alira was, she was not just a human. She was a catalyst. The moment her eyes opened, the universe had shifted, and humanity was no longer just a distant memory. It was a living, breathing force to be reckoned with. "Prepare the fleet," Zareth ordered sharply, his voice now clear and commanding. His fear had been replaced by a cold determination. "We cannot allow this to go any further. She must be contained before it's too late." But Zareth's words fell on deaf ears. The universe was already starting to take notice, and there was nothing the Arvathians could do to stop it. Alira stood up, her body moving with an energy that was both graceful and powerful. The strange glow in her eyes began to pulse with intensity, filling the chamber with a blinding light. She felt something deep within herself awakening, an ancient power that had been dormant for far too long. And as she took her first steps, she knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy had no idea what it was about to face, and Alira was just the first sign of what was to come, the awakening of power. Alira's feet touched the cold, smooth floor of the chamber, and with each step she took, the space around her seemed to tremble. The energy that had been dormant for so long surged through her, like a wild river bursting through a dam. She could feel it, power, pure and unrelenting, coursing through her veins. It wasn't just physical strength, though. It was something deeper, something primal, as though the very essence of the universe itself had been waiting for her to awaken. The soft hum in the chamber turned into a deafening roar, a low, resonant vibration that rattled the walls and seemed to shake the foundation of the entire complex. It was as if the building itself recognized her as the source of its power, and it was yielding to her. She could feel the ancient machinery responding to her presence, awakening from a long slumber, ready to serve her. Zareth, the Arvathian leader, stood frozen before his monitors. His long, slender fingers gripped the edge of his console. His thoughts were racing. This was not how things were supposed to happen. The human woman, Alira, was supposed to be just a simple subject of study, an insignificant speck in the vastness of the galaxy. But this was something else entirely. "We've underestimated them," Zareth muttered, his voice filled with disbelief. "All of them, not just her, but humanity." This was the moment we feared. He was not alone in his panic. The Arvathians, though outwardly confident, now felt an unfamiliar twinge of uncertainty. The galaxy, with its carefully maintained order, had been built on the assumption that the Arvathians were the most advanced civilization. They had ruled for eons, conquering and dominating lesser species. They had seen the rise and fall of countless empires. But humans, they had written them off as weak, primitive, unimportant. But now, it was clear. The humans had been hiding something far greater than anyone had imagined. Alira blinked, and the world around her seemed to come into focus. Her surroundings were unfamiliar, dark, cold, and full of strange technology. But the feeling inside her was anything but unfamiliar. It was as if she had always known this place. She felt the deep connection to the energy around her, as if it had been designed for her all along. Her eyes scanned the room, her gaze sharp and focused. Her surroundings were filled with technology far beyond anything she had ever encountered. Alien machines lined the walls, their glowing interfaces pulsing softly, seemingly responding to her presence. She reached out instinctively, her fingers brushing against one of the machines. The moment her hand made contact, the entire chamber seemed to react. The lights flickered and surged, and the air was filled with a soft hum as the walls began to shift and reshape. Alira felt a sudden, overwhelming surge of knowledge flood her mind, as though an entire galaxy of information was being transferred into her consciousness. She staggered back for a moment, but the knowledge settled within her, as if it had always been there, waiting to be unlocked. Her body adjusted to the power that coursed through her, and her mind began to process the vast amounts of data. The technology around her was alien. No, it was beyond alien. It was ancient, older than anything she had seen, yet it was somehow connected to her. But one thing was clear. She was not just a human anymore. She was something more. From the corner of the room, hidden in the shadows, a figure watched her. Zareth had been monitoring her every movement from his control center, and he could feel the power radiating from her even through the screens. His eyes narrowed as he analyzed her every action. He had seen human resilience before, but this was something completely new. "What is she?" Zareth whispered, almost to himself. His hand hovered over a control panel, his fingers trembling. His mind was racing to make sense of what he was witnessing. This wasn't just a human. This was something far more dangerous. Back in the chamber, Alira took another step forward, her eyes glowing even brighter now. She could feel the power growing within her. She wasn't sure where it came from or why she had been chosen, but one thing was certain. She could not, and would not, let this power go to waste. Her thoughts drifted back to the memories that had started to resurface, fragments of her past, flashes of battles, and faces long forgotten. She could remember humans standing against impossible odds, fighting against overwhelming forces. Humans had always been resilient. But now it was more than that. Now they were unstoppable. Alira's gaze turned toward the door at the far end of the chamber. There was a presence there, a shadow moving just beyond her reach. It was a threat. She could sense it. Zareth had ordered his elite forces to remain hidden, observing her every move. But now something had shifted. The moment Alira opened her eyes, the universe had changed. The galaxy was no longer as certain of its superiority. It was no longer as invincible as it once believed. Alira's hands clenched into fists as a sudden wave of energy surged through her. The room trembled once again, and the walls began to glow with an intensity that outshone the stars themselves. The alien technology hummed in response, recognizing the force within her. She could feel it now, the deep, untapped well of power within her. She could feel the destiny of humanity pushing her forward. The galaxy had never seen anything like this before, and it was about to learn the hard way that humanity would never again be dismissed. With a single, swift motion, Alira turned and made her way toward the exit. Her first steps were hesitant, but with each stride, her confidence grew. The power within her was undeniable, and the galaxy would soon learn why humanity was not to be underestimated. As the door to the chamber opened, Alira stepped into the unknown. The universe would never be the same again. The unleashing of humanity's power. The moment Alira stepped out of the chamber, the atmosphere around her seemed to shift. It wasn't just the physical environment that had changed, but something deeper, something almost spiritual. The air felt heavier, charged with energy, and the faint hum of the alien technology echoed in the background. Her mind was still reeling from the flood of knowledge, but one thing was certain. She wasn't just a human anymore. She had become something far greater. As Alira walked down the long corridor, she could feel the subtle tremor of the walls responding to her every step. It was as if the very structure of the place recognized her presence. Her senses were heightened, each sound amplified, each movement sharper. She felt the power inside her like an endless surge, constantly building, ready to explode. Her eyes glowed with an intensity that reflected the fire inside her. But this wasn't anger. This wasn't revenge. It was something different, something deeply ingrained within her, deep within humanity itself. She knew this power was ancient, a force that had been locked away for centuries, and now it was finally awakened. At the far end of the corridor, the first group of Arvithians stood waiting. Zareth had ordered his best soldiers to prepare for any potential threats. They had been monitoring Alira's every movement, tracking her progress. But no one had expected her to awaken with such power, such force. The Arvithians were experts in combat, trained in advanced weaponry and technology. They had conquered countless worlds, brought entire species to their knees. They had never encountered a species like humanity. And now, with Alira leading the charge, they were starting to realize that humans were not just another weak race in the galaxy. They were a force to be reckoned with. Zareth's mind raced as he watched the monitors, his heart pounding in his chest. He couldn't explain it. The humans had always been a nuisance, a species that had never posed any real threat to the established order. But now, they were something else entirely. The energy Alira radiated was unlike anything he had ever seen. "What is happening?" Zareth whispered, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and fear. His eyes never left the screen as Alira moved closer to the group of Arvithians. They raised their weapons, preparing for the worst. But Alira didn't even flinch. She wasn't afraid. In fact, the closer she got to them, the more her confidence grew. The Arvithians hesitated, unsure of what to do next. It was then that Alira raised her hand, not in an aggressive motion, but in a gesture of command. It was as if the very air around them shifted in response to her will. The soldiers took a step back, their weapons trembling in their hands. They had never experienced anything like this before. They had faced entire armies, conquered planets, and brought even the most fearsome species to their knees. But this was different. Alira's voice echoed in the corridor, calm but filled with a quiet power that sent chills down the spines of the Arvithians. "You can either leave this place or face the consequences of underestimating humanity," she said, her words sharp and unwavering. The soldiers exchanged uncertain glances. Their leader, Zareth, stood behind them, watching carefully. He could see the fear in their eyes, the uncertainty that gripped them. They had never been in this position before. The Arvithians had always believed they were invincible. They believed that no one, no species, could stand against their might. But now, in the presence of this human, this woman who had awoken an unimaginable power, they realized just how wrong they had been. Zareth stepped forward, his mind working frantically. The power Alira held was undeniable, but what exactly was it? He had never encountered anything like it. He had seen other species harness incredible abilities, but none like this. None with the strength, the raw power, that seemed to emanate from her every move. "We did not come here to fight," Zareth said, his voice surprisingly calm, though there was a nervous edge to it. "We came to learn, to understand. But it seems we have miscalculated." Alira's eyes narrowed. She could feel the tension in the room, the uncertainty hanging in the air. She could feel Zareth's fear, his realization that the balance of power was shifting. The humans, once thought to be weak and insignificant, were now the ones in control. "I suggest you leave, before it's too late," Alira replied, her tone still calm, but there was an undeniable edge to her words. "Humanity does not bow to anyone. Not anymore." Zareth stood in silence, his thoughts racing. He knew he had a choice: leave now and avoid a conflict, or stay and risk facing the full might of humanity's newfound strength. As the tension in the room grew, Alira's mind began to process the incredible abilities she had unlocked. The knowledge of humanity's history, their triumphs, their strength, and their resilience filled her thoughts. She knew the galaxy had underestimated them, and now, with the power she possessed, it would never make that mistake again. The Arvithians were no longer the invincible conquerors they once believed themselves to be. In the face of Alira's power, they were just another species, fighting for survival. And humanity. Humanity was no longer weak, no longer helpless. They were a force to be reckoned with, and the galaxy was about to learn why. With a final, decisive motion, Alira turned her back on the Arvithians, her footsteps echoing in the hallway as she moved toward the unknown. She had made her decision. She would lead humanity into a new age, a time when no one would dare underestimate them again. As the doors behind her closed, sealing her off from the Arvithians, Zareth stood motionless, contemplating the gravity of what had just happened. The universe had changed in an instant, and humanity, led by one unstoppable force, was now at the center of it all. The galaxy would never forget what it had witnessed today. The first strike. The moment Alira stepped into the command center, the silence was deafening. Every officer, every soldier, every alien in the room froze. The heavy air of uncertainty hung thick in the room. It was as if time itself had stopped the moment humanity's representative entered. They had watched the footage of Alira's confrontation with Xereth's soldiers. They had seen how her presence alone had caused their mightiest warriors to tremble. Alira's steps were deliberate, echoing off the metallic floor, each one a reminder of what she was capable of. She didn't speak a word as she moved to the center of the room. Her eyes were cold, but there was a fire in them, a promise of what was to come. Her hands were clenched at her sides, a reminder of the raw power she now held. The room was filled with high-ranking officers of various alien races, each of them fearful of the new reality they were facing. They had come to Earth with the belief that they would once again subdue a species they considered insignificant. But they were wrong. Humanity was no longer the weak species they once thought. They had underestimated the power of human resolve and the force they had unlocked. Xereth, though standing behind the others, couldn't take his eyes off Alira. The same fear that had gripped his soldiers seemed to weigh on him as well. He had never believed in the stories, the rumors that spoke of humanity's potential. But now, with the evidence before him, he knew it was no myth. He had watched as the might of the Arvithians, invincible for millennia, had crumbled under her power. "We have made a grave mistake," Xereth muttered under his breath, though just loud enough for the others to hear. Alira's gaze swept across the room, and the tension rose once more. They had gathered here to discuss how to deal with humanity, how to manage the growing threat. But now, with Alira's presence, the discussions had shifted from strategy to survival. They were no longer thinking about how to control humanity, but whether they could survive their wrath. A few moments passed before Alira broke the silence. Her voice was calm, but her words carried a weight that seemed to sink into the very walls around them. "I didn't come here to negotiate," she said, her eyes narrowing as she surveyed the gathered officers. "I came to ensure humanity's survival. And that means making sure no one underestimates us again." Her words were not a challenge. They were a statement, and the alien officers understood it. The fear in the room deepened as Alira continued. "I know what you're all thinking," she said, her voice quiet but filled with certainty. "You came to Earth believing we were weak, thinking you could dominate us as you have done with so many others. But we're not like the others. We will not bend. We will not kneel." Xereth couldn't help but shudder. The words rang true in his ears. The arrogance they had carried into this encounter was slipping away, replaced by a growing understanding of just how far they had overestimated their own strength. Alira took a step forward, her eyes locked on Xereth. "And now, you will leave Earth. You will take your forces and go back to your homeworlds, or you will face humanity's wrath." Xereth swallowed hard, his throat dry. He had never backed down from a fight, never feared anyone. But before him stood a force unlike anything he had ever encountered. Alira wasn't just a human. She was a symbol of what humanity had become, a species that would no longer be overlooked. The tension in the room was unbearable as Xereth weighed his options. He could see it in Alira's eyes. She wasn't bluffing. There was no negotiation here. It was either surrender or face an unstoppable force. We will consider your words," Xereth said, his voice trembling despite his attempts to sound confident. "But you must understand, leaving Earth is not as simple as you think." Alira's eyes flared with a fierce light, and for a brief moment, Xereth feared she might strike. But instead, she nodded slowly, acknowledging his words. "I understand," she said, her tone colder than ice. "But the clock is ticking, and when it runs out, you will wish you had listened to humanity before." She turned, and with that, the meeting was over. The alien officers could only watch as she exited the room, the tension still hanging in the air. Xereth and his commanders remained frozen in place, staring at the empty doorway, unsure of what to do next. What they had just witnessed was the beginning of a new era, one where humanity would no longer cower before alien invaders. They had been wrong to believe the humans were weak. They had been wrong to think they could control them. And now, with Alira leading them, humanity was poised to prove that they were a force that could not be ignored. Zareth's mind raced as he considered his options. He had underestimated humanity, and now he feared that they had awoken a power that would reshape the galaxy forever. There was no going back. The galaxy had learned, in the most brutal way possible, that humanity could no longer be ignored. And it was only just the beginning. The shifting tide. The galaxy had always considered itself a place of order, where the strongest species reigned supreme and others were either subjugated or swept away in the currents of time. But all of that had changed. Humanity had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and the galaxy could no longer pretend that it was still the same place it had once been. Alira's warning echoed through the minds of the alien leaders as they retreated to their ships. The Arvithian command center had fallen silent after her departure. Each officer was left to contemplate what had just happened, what they had just witnessed. On their homeworld, the Arvithian military had long been a symbol of power. For centuries, they had crushed any species that dared to challenge them. But now, they were faced with a growing realization. Humanity was not like the others. They had seen it firsthand. The footage of Alira's brutal defeat of their strongest warriors had spread through the ranks like wildfire. Her strength, her resilience, and her will had shattered their belief in their own superiority. The Arvithians were not alone in their fear. Across the galaxy, other species that had long seen themselves as invincible began to take notice. The Icrics, a species known for their ruthless conquest and advanced weaponry, were one of the first to react. They had long heard of humanity's potential, but they had dismissed it as nothing more than myth. Now, they had no choice but to face the terrifying truth. A secret meeting was called by the Icrics' High Command, and within their war council, a sense of unease filled the air. Their leader, Corveth, paced back and forth, his sharp eyes scanning the holographic map of the galaxy before him. His species had conquered hundreds of worlds, and they had done so without mercy. But now, they were unsure whether their might would be enough to subdue humanity. Corvath, what if we made a mistake? One of his generals asked, his voice trembling. Humanity, they're different. We thought we could wipe them out like we did with others, but what if we've underestimated them? Another officer added. Corvath stopped pacing and turned to face them. His expression hardened. I've seen the footage. We've all seen what their so-called human did. The strength, the willpower, the absolute fearlessness. The Arvithians couldn't stop her, and neither will we. A chilling silence fell over the room. Corvath's eyes glinted with something dangerous. We cannot afford to wait. If we are to avoid the same fate as the Arvithians, we must act swiftly. Humanity must be crushed before they can unite with the other species. But we've never encountered anything like them, the general protested. Which is why we must strike before they become a true threat to us. We cannot let them grow stronger, Corvath declared. Prepare the fleet. We leave at once. The order was given, and the Icric ships began to mobilize, their engines roaring to life as they made their way toward Earth. They would not be the first to underestimate humanity, but they would be the last. Back on Earth, Alira sat in a war room, reviewing the latest reports. News of the alien fleets gathering in the outer regions of the galaxy had reached her ears. The galaxy's most powerful species were finally acknowledging the threat humanity posed. She knew that this was only the beginning. The Icrics, the Arvithians, and others would soon come knocking, and they wouldn't stop until they had seen the end of humanity. But Alira wasn't afraid. In fact, she welcomed the challenge. Humanity was no longer the prey. They were the hunters now, and they would make sure that the galaxy never forgot why they were a force to be reckoned with. We faced worse, Alira muttered to herself, her voice steady. And we will face them all. She turned to her team, who were gathered around a large holographic table. We will need every weapon, every fighter, every ally we can gather. It's time to show the galaxy just who they're dealing with. Her words were simple, but the conviction behind them was undeniable. Humanity had only just begun to prove its worth. The galaxy had learned one harsh truth: humanity was unstoppable. The war for the future of the galaxy was just beginning, and Alira would be at the forefront. There was no turning back now. The universe had already been warned, and it had failed to listen. The consequences would soon be unavoidable. The galaxy would learn that humanity's wrath was not something they could escape. The storm was coming, and it was humanity that would reign at the eye of it. The Icrics, the Arvithians, and every other species that dared challenge humanity would soon learn what it meant to awaken a sleeping giant. The gathering storm. The galaxy was about to change forever. Alira stood on the bridge of Earth's flagship, gazing out into the vast expanse of space. The stars seemed so peaceful, yet she knew that everything was about to be shattered. Every alien empire that once believed humanity was insignificant was now scrambling, fearful of the storm that was coming. Humanity had proven its power, and the universe could no longer ignore it. The fleet she commanded was vast, a symbol of Earth's newfound strength, ships of every size and shape, all unified under one cause: survival. But they weren't just preparing to defend their home. They were preparing to take the fight to those who dared to challenge them. Alira's mind raced with the decisions ahead. The Icrics were mobilizing, preparing to strike with everything they had. They had underestimated humanity before, and now they were coming to Earth, determined to wipe them out. But Alira wasn't worried. She had a plan. As she turned to address her crew, she saw the same determination reflected in their eyes. They knew what was at stake. They had watched their comrades fall, had felt the weight of the losses. But now, they would make the invaders feel that same fear. Humanity had already shown what they could do. Now they would show the galaxy that no one could stand against them. "Report," Alira commanded, her voice cold and calm, betraying nothing of the storm brewing inside her. The officer at the control panel nodded, pulling up the latest data. "The Acrix fleet is just beyond the asteroid belt, Commander. We estimate they'll reach Earth's orbit within 3 days." Alira's eyes narrowed. 3 days. It wasn't much time, but it would have to be enough. "Have the fleet ready," she said. "I want no surprises. We can't afford to let them get the first strike." The officer nodded, and the crew immediately sprang into action. Alira could feel the tension in the air. This was it. There was no turning back. The galaxy would soon witness humanity's true power. Elsewhere in the galaxy, the Icrics were preparing for their own final assault. On their homeworld, the War Council had met to finalize their strategy. Korvath, their leader, stood before a group of his generals, all of them tense and uncertain. "The humans must be eradicated," Korvath said, his voice low and filled with venom. "We cannot let them continue to grow. Their power is unlike anything we've ever seen. If we allow them to become stronger, we will regret it." The Icrix generals nodded, but the doubt in their eyes was hard to miss. They had already seen what Alira and her people were capable of. The Arvithians had fallen, and the Icrics were determined not to suffer the same fate. "We must strike first," one of the generals urged. "We can't allow them to regroup. Once they're ready, it will be too late." Korvath paused for a moment, considering the advice. He knew the Icrics' advantage lay in their strength and firepower, but facing an unknown enemy as fierce as humanity was a dangerous gamble. "We leave in 2 days," Korvath finally ordered. "Tell the fleet to prepare for full-scale invasion." The Icrix warships powered up their engines, their dark silhouettes casting long shadows as they prepared for their final march toward Earth. They would make sure humanity understood that their resistance was futile. But Alira knew something that Korvath didn't. Humanity wasn't going to sit idly by. They weren't going to be swept away by any invading force. She could already feel the pulse of determination that was coursing through the Earth's fleet. Her people were ready for battle. As the countdown to battle began, Alira found herself standing in the quiet of her command center. gazing out at the stars. It was in these moments, before the storm, that her mind sharpened and focused. The battle ahead would not just be about survival. It would be a battle to send a message to the galaxy. Humanity was here to stay. Her thoughts were interrupted by a communication from Earth's capital. The president's voice came through the speakers, calm but filled with urgency. "Alira," the president said, "the Vicrics are closing in. It's time. Humanity stands with you." Alira straightened, a fire lighting in her chest. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. Humanity had long been underestimated, pushed to the brink. But now, with Alira leading them, they would show the universe why they were unstoppable. "We won't back down," Alira replied, her voice steady and resolute. "This is our home, and we will fight for it." The president's voice came through once more. "Make us proud." As the communication ended, Alira turned back to the window. The stars no longer seemed peaceful. They seemed to burn with a promise. Humanity was going to make its stand, and the galaxy would never forget it. In the depths of space, the Ecrix fleet pressed forward, oblivious to the strength they would soon encounter. They had underestimated humanity before. Now they would learn the consequences of their mistake. The storm was coming, and humanity was its harbinger. Alira's eyes burned with purpose. The galaxy was about to see what humanity was truly capable of. The battle for survival was just beginning, and Earth was ready to fight. "You said, the unstoppable force." The day of reckoning had arrived. The tension in the air was palpable. The Ecrix fleet, a force that had once conquered countless worlds, was now on the edge of Earth's atmosphere. In their minds, this would be no different than any of their other campaigns. They would land, crush the resistance, and leave Earth as another conquered world to add to their ever-expanding empire. But they had severely miscalculated. They hadn't understood humanity. They hadn't comprehended the raw fury and determination that burned within every human heart. Alira stood at the helm of the Earth's flagship, watching the massive Ecrix fleet as it approached. The black ships loomed in the distance, each one a monument to the alien race's strength. But to Alira, they were nothing more than targets. Every Ecrix ship was a threat, but no more than that. Humanity had learned how to turn such threats into triumphs. Her command staff worked with intense focus, their hands flying over controls, keeping an eye on every ship, every tactical shift. The energy on the bridge was electric. This was it, the moment the galaxy would understand that humanity was not something to be trifled with. "Status report," Alira said calmly, her voice unwavering. The officer at the control panel responded without hesitation. "Ecrix fleet is on course for Earth. Estimated time to arrival, 30 minutes. We've deployed our defenses. The fleet is ready, Commander." Alira nodded. "Good. Make sure every ship is in position. We wait for their first move." The countdown had begun, but there was no fear in Alira's eyes. Only certainty. Humanity had been cornered for far too long. Now they would stand and fight, and the galaxy would witness their strength. On the other side, the Ecrix commanders felt the pressure mounting. Corvath, their supreme leader, paced across the deck of his flagship, growing increasingly agitated. The reports had started coming in, and they weren't good. The Earth fleet wasn't just defending, it was preparing for an offensive. "Report," Corvath barked. "Why haven't we reached the planet yet?" One of his generals answered, a hint of unease in his voice. "Their defenses are stronger than we anticipated. Our scouts report that they've activated hidden weapons systems, something we've never encountered before." Corvath's sharp gaze turned to the star map before him. Earth was preparing for war, and they were ready for whatever the Ecrix threw at them. "This is it," Corvath said, his voice steely. "There's no turning back. Initiate the assault." In that moment, the massive Ecrix fleet opened fire. Bright beams of energy streaked through space, aimed directly at Earth. Their weapons, capable of obliterating entire cities, were about to descend upon humanity's home. But as the first wave of attacks hit Earth's shields, something unexpected happened. The shields, designed with technology humanity had reverse-engineered from the galaxy's greatest threats, absorbed the blasts and reinforced themselves. Before the Icrix could even react, the Earth fleet responded. Alira had planned for this. The human fleet launched a coordinated counterattack, and what happened next was something no one had expected. The Earth ships, small compared to the Icrix behemoths, moved with speed and precision. They dodged, weaved, and fired relentlessly. Humanity's ingenuity, their adaptability, was on full display. Every shot, every maneuver was calculated, and with each successful strike, the Icrix fleet's superiority began to crumble. Korvath watched in disbelief. His ships were being taken down one by one. How could this be happening? They were supposed to be the ones in control. They had underestimated humanity once before, and now they were paying the price. Meanwhile, Alira's voice echoed through the comms, a signal for the next phase of the plan. Deploy the ground forces. The Icrix will know that humanity doesn't just fight in space. Humanity's best warriors were ready. Alira had forged alliances with every faction, every rebel group, and every individual who had ever been wronged by the galaxy's oppressors. They were all here now, joining together in the fight to protect Earth. The enemy was about to face a force far more terrifying than they could have ever imagined. On the surface, humanity's ground forces began to engage the Icrix's invasion forces. The battle unfolded in the streets of Earth's major cities. Chaos, destruction, and a ferocious defense by humanity's finest. But despite the overwhelming odds, humanity never faltered. The Icrix had miscalculated once more. They were fighting not just for survival, but for the future of every human on Earth. The stakes could not have been higher. Back in space, the tide was turning. The Icrix were forced to retreat, one by one, as the combined might of humanity's fleet and ground forces proved too much to handle. But Korvath refused to accept defeat. As his flagship began to retreat, he clenched his fists, filled with frustration. "This isn't over," Korvath muttered under his breath. "We will return. The galaxy will see what we are capable of." But for now, humanity had won. Alira watched the retreating fleet, her expression resolute. This was just the beginning. The galaxy had been warned once more that humanity could not be ignored. The storm they had unleashed would not dissipate until every alien who threatened Earth knew the price of underestimating humanity. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. Humanity had shown the galaxy its true power, and there was no going back now. The Icrix would return, and others would follow, but humanity was ready for them. The universe had learned a hard lesson. The wrath of humanity was unstoppable, and it was only just beginning.